You might be waiting for the new generation Toyota Prado to arrive, but what if you want a few extra luxuries in life and you don't want a diesel engine? Well, this could be the answer. It's the new generation Lexus GX, and yeah, it's based on the Prado, but it has a fair few differences and a lot more luxury. So please ring the bell and you'll be updated when I do my Prado review soon as well. Let's go look at it, shall we? In detail. Yes, this new generation Lexus GX is basically a Toyota Prado, but done the Lexus way. And look, there's plenty of differentiation between this and the donor vehicle. It's the first time that Lexus Australia has offered a GX in our market, despite the fact that it has been available in other markets like the US for a really long time. But hey, I reckon it's a good thing because it does fill an important gap in the market for this brand. And I also think that there's pretty good value on offer here. Like the entry-level version, which is this one here, it's called the Luxury. It starts at $116,000. Now that might seem like a lot of money, but it's a 7-seater with all-wheel drive and a twin turbocharged petrol V6 engine. So yeah, that stacks up pretty well. And then you think about the standard spec, you're getting things like LED lighting around the car. There's also 20-inch alloy wheels with a full-size spare. You get 8-way power adjustable heated and ventilated seats, heated second-row outboard seats. There's push-button third-row folding seats. You also get tri-zone climate control, a head-up display, a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, a 14-inch infotainment screen. There's wireless and wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a 10-speaker sound system, wireless phone charging, plenty of USB ports, a 360-degree camera, and a power tailgate as well. And it comes with 7 seats too. And in the middle of the range is that off-road focused Overtrail version. It's 122.5 grand, so a bit more money, but it actually removes the third row seats. So in that version, you just get a big boot. It's a 5-seater and it has plenty of extra off-roady focused stuff. So it gets 18-inch wheels with all-terrain tires, plus there's wheel arch moldings and unique bumpers and black trim highlights. It also gets adaptive variable suspension, a locking rear diff. It's also got that very tricky electronic kinetic dynamic suspension system, so EKDSS for those who know what that is. And a different interior trim is available too, and a refrigerated cool box for that one as well. So it's definitely the adventure focused version, but if you want the really plush one, then you have to go for the top spec Sports Luxury. It's a 7-seater as well. You see the price for it on your screen now. All these prices are before on-road costs, by the way. And it has a few more features. Again, 7 seats, but it also gets 22-inch wheels and adaptive high beams. It's also got power extending side steps, a panoramic glass roof. It's also got that adaptive variable suspension, more driver's seat adjustment, a 21-speaker Mark Levinson sound system, a digital rear view camera mirror, which is really handy, and leather accented seats. And also it gets that refrigerated cool box too. So a family-friendly one, that car, I reckon. But what about the alternatives that you might want to consider? There are some really good ones. If you're thinking about spending this kind of money on a big, luxury-focused, off-road-ish capable SUV, then maybe you should go and check out the Land Rover Discovery. It comes with a choice of petrol and diesel engines. It's very capable off-road, very comfortable on-road, with 3 rows of seats and plenty of style as well. I know there are a lot of people who don't love the look of that car, and hey, if that's you, maybe just buy a Defender instead, because it's got the boxy look if that's what you're after. It's also a really fantastic alternative to this if you are considering a big vehicle with 3 rows of seats. The Defender 130 in particular has a few versions that you might want to check out, and I think that those two are some of the most compelling options that you could consider if you are looking at an alternative to this. You could wait for that Prado, as I said, or maybe you could have a look at the Land Cruiser 300 series. It starts at a lower price point than this, and it does have a diesel engine, which might be the difference for you. That makes it a really compelling alternative if you are considering doing longer road trips, family stuff with your vehicle. Then hey, it might make a bit more sense than this, but it's also a bigger car, so it might not necessarily suit your needs. But I also think that it isn't necessarily as fun to drive as this is, but we'll get to the driving stuff later on. Would you choose any of those? Oh, what about the Jeep Grand Cherokee L? It's now heaps cheaper. You can get a flagship version of that US made big SUV for less than the entry-level version of this. Would you consider it? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's a pretty sizable thing, this Lexus GX, just over 5 meters in length, although because it's got that boxy body and that sort of really macho profile, it doesn't actually look as big as it is, well, in some regards anyway. It's tall, it's wide, and it's long, and it's got standard side steps, which is good. And at the back, I do like this light bar at the rear. I think it does add a little bit of wow factor. And you've also got some really practical elements to this rear section. So the glass actually pops open independently, which means that you don't have to open the entire tailgate if you just want to access what's behind the third row. So if you're dropping in your shopping or something like that, you can just plonk it all in behind there, and it does make it a fair bit easier. It also means that you can reverse closer to a parking space wall or something like that. So if there's a wall there, you don't have to open the entire tailgate in order to access the boot. I think that is just clever. I mean, we've seen it before, but it's still one of the smartest things that lots of brands don't do. All right, let's take a look in the boot with the full tailgate opening situation. Yes, fully electric tailgate for all grades. Yeah, so like I showed you, well, just before, there is still a decent amount of space behind those third row seats, and you can see the figure on your screen now for how much cargo capacity is actually available to you. I reckon that's a decent usability factor in terms of using those 3 rows of seats if you're going to do that full time. But let me lower them down and show you how much boot space you've got as a 5-seater. So the way you do that is using these electric adjusters here. I think that is clever, but also a bit of a waste because it just takes so long to do this maneuver. Honestly, in some other cars, it would take 1/10 of the amount of time to lower those seats down, but it's because they've got some clever folding stuff underneath that section of those seats. But yes, you can see for yourself, there's plenty of space in here. If you're using this as a 5-seater, it's going to be very amenable to your family needs. And look at this space. There's so much, and there's also a fair few good features in the back here. You do get a couple of little shopping bag hooks, one on either side, some cargo tie downs as well. There's a power point in the back, which is always a win. And yes, for those third row occupants, there are some good amenities as well, but we'll get to that when we get in the back. And hey, there's also a spare wheel underneath the floor here, so that's good to see, and it might come in handy if you're going off-roading or just touring around town. And what's also handy, there are these controls here. If you do want to adjust those third row seats, you just reach into the rear wheel arch behind the second row seats, and you can put those seats back up. And this will show you just how clever the mechanism underneath those seats is in terms of the usability. And that's why they're fully electric. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, this is your point of view perspective of the entry-level version of the Lexus GX, and in some ways it does feel a little bit entry-level, and in other ways it actually feels a little bit Toyota. So there are some finishes in here that maybe aren't what I was expecting of a Lexus. This sort of trim on the doors, which is kind of hard but not quite squishy and soft. This perforated finish in the door trims there, and also the dashboard plastics are a bit, well, plasticky. So it is maybe feeling a little bit like the donor car in some ways, but there's also some obvious differentiators to make it feel special in a few ways too. So you've got this big digital instrument screen, as I mentioned. Just ignore the warning on the screen there. That's just because the car's not running. And look, I reckon that this is very usable, it's very manageable, and there's a few different ways that you can interact with it. So you can use the controls on the steering wheel and adjust the view and make it basically whatever you want it to be. It's not necessarily as configurable as some other screens in the segment, but hey, I think it's good enough. There's also a standard head-up display, which is a bonus in my opinion. And you've also got the non-haptic controls on the steering wheel, which is a massive, massive win, because the existing Lexuses that have come out in the past couple of years have had these haptic controls, which were very easy to bump. These ones, physical, actual buttons, which I know that off-roaders in particular will really, really appreciate. Now, you've got relatively conventional stalks, blinkers on the right and lights, and also your wipers on the left. And those little purple lights there, that's your driver monitoring camera system. So that little screen has a camera behind it that looks at your eyes to make sure that you're paying attention. Now, there's some elements of this design that I think are really quite snazzy, but other bits where it's a bit, well, flat looking. Like, it doesn't have that much contour or wow factor to this cabin for 116 grand. This big flat section where the screen is, obviously, that's for the screen, but it sort of just doesn't quite look finished in some ways in my eyes. And the screen, it's just like lots of the other Lexus screens that have come out in the past couple of years. It is a little bit fiddly and you do have to learn where the menus are. Thankfully though, it does have that wireless Apple CarPlay system if that's what you want to use. And your controls for the climate are all on the screen as well. As you can see, there's little dials with displays in there as well, and I'll just turn that off so it's quieter. You've got a volume dial, which is a bonus too, I think, and quick buttons for your demister for your front window and also for your mirrors and your rear glass too. So look, the screen, I think, you know, you need to spend a bit of time with this car to see if you like the way the screen behaves. I just think that some of the menus are a little bit buried. Now, in terms of other elements to this cabin, there's a hidden 12-volt port in there, and you can also maybe put your phone in there. This is a covered center console area as well with a couple of cup holders. There's a wireless phone charger there, and here is a decent size center console bin. Now, your main controls here that you might want to pay attention to. High range four-wheel drive is up, and push it down for low range four-wheel drive if you're going off-road. Center diff lock in this base model grade, but like I said, there are higher grade versions with more diff differentials. There's also a traction control off switch, a towing and hauling mode switch, and you've got your drive mode selector up here as well. So that'll change on the screen there depending on which mode you're in. And if you do decide to put it into tow and haul, it'll also tell you that you're there on that screen up there. And look, I think that for the most part, it's all relatively easy to get your head around, relatively simple, thankfully, but is it too simple for the money? That's the big question. Now, you do have a decent size glove box, which is filled up with stuff, and there's a little tray down there as well, so you could store a phone or something in there as well. The seats are pretty comfortable, I have to say. They're not overly supportive, but they are comfy. And you've got heating and cooling for the front seats, electric adjustment as well. Up here, there is no sunglasses holder, but you do get an SOS button. So if you're in an accident, you can dial for help. And in some instances, it'll actually dial for you. And you've also got illuminated vanity mirrors and a little card holder for your parking tickets and so forth. There's grab handles to get in and out because it is pretty big, this car. And you've also got grab handles even for the driver. So hold on tight. Now this one does have an auto dimming rear vision mirror, but it doesn't have the digital camera mirror. So like you can see, those headrests in the back, imagine this car with 5 faces pointing at you there. So it would be really hard to see out the back, but you don't get the digital camera mirror on anything but the top spec model. Bit of a shame. All right, let's check out those back seats, shall we? Now I've had to wind down the windows in the back here because it's very dark in this car, and this particular car has a sunroof fitted, but yeah, it's not necessarily a very airy feeling cabin because of this really dark headliner and dark trim material as well, and dark carpet. So it does feel pretty cocoon-like in the back, I would say, but let's have a look at the space on offer. So this seat is set for me at 182 centimeters or 6 foot, and these are my knees in this seating position. And I've got, well, a bit of space in front of my legs, a bit of leg room as well. In fact, about the same as I get in a 5-seat version of the Lexus LX. So it's kind of impressive in terms of the amount of space. You've got decent sized pockets in the back there. There's one on the other side as well. You've got bottle holders in the doors too. Pretty basic trim on the doors. You get ISOFIX points in the window seats. There's outboard seat heating as well, as I mentioned. A flip down armrest with cup holders. So all of the family friendly features are pretty much covered. You've got climate control in the back as well with a fan controller. And there's also a couple of USB ports down here as well. USB-C, I should say. So that's good to see. Those seat heating buttons are down there in case you're wondering. And there are vents in the ceiling as well, plus grab handles, plus coat hooks. So yes, oh, and if you're wondering about my headroom, yeah, the sunroof does eat into the space a bit, and that's maybe why it feels like it is a little bit cavey. But yeah, I think that it's okay. Now, I'm gonna jump in the third row and see what it's like. Let's do that now. Okay, so you can't slide the seat forward, but you can tilt and fold the seat to allow access to the third row. The bigger portion is on the road side rather than the curb side, so you can make your own mind up about that as to whether that's better than the other way around. But here it goes. Yep, there's a decent amount of access to get in here. Now let me jump in and see what it's like. Right, so I'm back here. I've put this seat to where I was sitting before, so yep, it doesn't slide, but you can see I am in the back row and I'm a 6-footer and I have enough knee room to fit. My toe room is a little bit tight, and it is only a 2-seater back here and they are quite small seats. Look at that. My buttock is almost hanging off the side. So maybe I could spread my legs out a little bit and be a bit more comfortable. But look, I think it's okay. And the headroom, again, is actually kind of better in the third row than in the second row because it doesn't feel quite as cavey. You've got lots of glass, you've got grab handles in the back. There are vents back here as well. And you can even recline the seat, so or incline the seat. So just a little bit. I mean, that's something. It adds something. You've got USB-C ports back here as well. There's a light back here too. Maybe I should have had that on so I could see what I was doing. And I think that, you know, it is a usable enough space, but don't go thinking that you'll be able to fit car seats in here because it doesn't have any third row anchor points at all. Yeah. Does that rule it out? It might for some people, but otherwise I think it's an okay experience in the third row. In fact, better than okay. All Lexus GX models in Australia at launch are powered by a 3.4 litre twin turbocharged V6 petrol engine with a huge 260 kilowatts of power, 650 Newton meters of torque, with drive sent to all 4 wheels via a 10-speed automatic transmission. Yes, there's low range gearing, a locking center diff is standard as well, and you are looking at a pretty decent amount of towing capacity as well for this car. 750 kilos unbraked, 3.5 tons braked towing capacity for the luxury and also the Overtrail model, but a little bit less for the sports luxury. It gets a 3130 kilo top towing capacity. You reckon that's good enough? I reckon for most people it bloody well will be. As I said earlier, this review is just going to be focused on on-road stuff, day-to-day driving, livability, that sort of thing. The stuff that you will be doing with a car like this far more often than you will be going off-road. So let's talk about the on-road drive experience. And let me tell you, for something that is designed for off-roading and designed to be super capable, it's also surprisingly good around town. I have to preface that though by saying, does it feel like a Lexus to drive? Not necessarily, and not like most other Lexuses at least. Sort of feels more like the LX than anything else, obviously, but shared components there. But I think that you do get a decent drivability for what is, like I said, an off-road capable vehicle, but it is just pretty cruisy, pretty comfortable, and pretty easy going in terms of the drivability. It's got decent steering, which is actually pretty reactive. It's kind of a bit slow on center, and it does take a bit of turning of the wheel when you do a reverse parallel park, or if you're doing a U-turn in a cul-de-sac or something like that, you will need to do a bit of arm twirling. But I think that for the most part, the steering's perfectly predictable, and it's a little bit wallowy, obviously. It's not a super sharp handling thing, but the ride is also pretty good as well. It handles itself pretty decently over lumpy, bumpy sections of road. Look, I'll go over some here. It's got 20-inch wheels and it's doing a fine job as far as I can tell for this drive experience that I've been throwing at it. I mean, if you hit a really sharp edge, you can feel it, but it's hardly uncomfortable or hard to deal with or hard to live with. I think it's absolutely adequate for this sort of car. And also this engine. Okay, so in day-to-day driving, it's a bit of a whatever. That might seem a bit harsh for a twin-turbo V6, but yeah, I mean, it's just like a petrol engine. It just has that, you know, sort of motion to it. Again, well suited to this sort of application. Fine, decent response, pretty powerful, even better when you put it into sport mode, and then, yeah, it's very, very, very fast. So if you aren't expecting this to be a really fast car, remember how much power and torque it's got. It is a twin turbo V6 petrol engine. It's got a clever 10-speed automatic transmission in most situations. It is a little bit eager to upshift in normal driving, but when you put it in sport mode, the transmission becomes a bit more active and a bit more thoughtful about how things are progressing. Now, yeah, it's got permanent four-wheel drive, so you don't need to worry about mucking around with that on-road, and I like the fact that there is that traction that you would expect from a permanent all-wheel drive system like this. So I think that for the most part, this drive experience is exactly what it should be. It's not setting any benchmarks in terms of dynamics, but it's also way better than I was expecting it to be for something that has this level of capability built into the hardware, into the chassis. So you tell me what you think. Is it the best in the class? It's one of the best. And another thing that I really can't understate the brilliance of is the safety systems. Like, these safety systems are some of the best that I've experienced. The fact that it has all the tech, like it's got a driver monitoring camera system, but it doesn't annoy you. It's got the speed sign recognition tech, but it just shows that it's red when you're going over the speed limit. It doesn't beep and bong and warn you and chime at you and get on your nerves. And the lane keeping assistance is even pretty good. Like, I haven't turned it off, which is a massive tick in my book. If I don't have to turn off the lane keeping, it means that you've done it right. And this car, well, it does so much right. There's no doubt about that. But there's one thing that maybe it doesn't do so well, and that's fuel consumption. All right, let's talk efficiency with this big boy. If you're a sedate driver, or if you do mainly long distance driving, I think you'll see close to that, maybe even less. You might get 10 if you do a lot of freeway driving. But I have to say, what is most alarming about it is that it has an 80-litre fuel tank and that it has 95 RON premium unleaded as the main requirement. And it's also got a really pessimistic fuel gauge. So the distance to empty when I got into this car, 80-litre fuel tank, the distance to empty was showing just over 400 kilometers. What? What is going on with that? I mean, I'm an optimist, but that is ridiculously pessimistic. I would like to think that you'll be able to get more than that on regular driving duties. But if you're wondering what I've seen over my time with this car, you'll see the number on your screen. That was what was displayed on the trip computer after a couple of days of doing the usual daily driving stuff. So, is that good enough? I'd love to know your thoughts. Hit me up in the comments. On the safety front, there's plenty of standard spec and tech, but it doesn't have a safety rating just yet. That might change at some point in the future, but you're still getting things like autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist, head-on and junction avoidance. And there's other stuff like a full-speed adaptive cruise control system, so it'll go all the way to a stop and then keep going. There's lane keeping assistance, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert. You get front and rear parking sensors. You get a surround view camera system and a reversing camera with a washer for the cameras as well, which is really cool. And there's plenty of other stuff like safe exit assist and all that sort of gear that you would expect. Traffic sign recognition, which doesn't beep and bong, which is great, and a heap of other really good features. And there's a driver monitoring camera, and it's not annoying either. So that's a win in my book. There's also 9 airbags fitted to this car, including dual front, front side, front center, curtain airbags for all 3 rows, and probably more. There's a lot of airbags. Lexus Australia has a really good reputation for customer service and the ownership experience. And look, this car comes with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty as standard. Plus, there's also a cap price servicing plan for the first 5 years too. And you'll see the average cost over that 5-year period on your screen. And now I'll show you also what the servicing intervals for this car are too. Now, included in that, there's also a level of roadside assistance. Plus, there's access to the Lexus Encore program, a 3-year free membership for all versions of the Lexus GX, which allows you access to a few special events and that sort of thing, and some extra nice things when it comes to getting your car maintained. They'll come and collect it and clean it and all that sort of stuff as well if you need that. So what do you think? I reckon it stacks up pretty well, but hey, what about those service prices? As I said at the start of this video, this was always going to be an on-road focused, livability focused take on this car, and hopefully at a later date I'll get a chance to drive the Overtrail and do some off-roading and tell you what I think about it in that sort of situation. But as it is, this is very impressive in a lot of ways, but hey, that I guess thirst for the fuel might be a real concern for those who like to do long distance and use the interior to its maximum capacity as well. Tell me what you think about it in the comments section below. Would you choose this? Would you wait for the Prado? I'd love to know. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to keep up to date with all of my reviews. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.